I've been here for 40 years in town. I grew up in the town next door in Palmer.
I've been born, brought up here, and I've lived here in this particular spot since 1966. We married my wife and we built this house.
So we have been living here since June of 2001. I grew up in Wilbraham, he grew up in Hamden, and I'm a teacher here in Monson.
I met my boyfriend at the time, and then we moved to Monson, and I lived there for 5 years.
I grew up in Monson. My family built this house and moved here when I was 10 years old.
I came to Monson in 2004 when I began serving First Church of Monson.
Now I've been the rep here for 12 years, and one of the kind of cool things, just going back for me, Monson, it's so spread out, 30-something square miles. Difficult town to go door to door. I mean, there's only small sections.
We also have a lot of agriculture in town. We have Echo Hill Apple Orchard, Westview Creamery for homemade ice cream, and the best sunsets in town.
The wooded areas, there's places to go hiking, there's campgrounds.
One of the wonderful things about our downtown is the steeples.
There were a number of different eras of wood in the First Church of Monson steeple as construction had been done at different times. So over the years it had been reinforced and repaired and as well as replaced. There was a lot that had been done on that.
Well, before the downtown was actually called $1 Million Mile. All the homes were very nice.
You come into the quaint little New England town with the New England architecture, all the churches and things like that, the little shops. The trees were huge that lined Main Street.
Well, I started Summerfest. We have bands playing. At night we had the block dance at night and we had fireworks afterwards. It was just a great gathering for everybody.
There was a flood in 1955 that actually destroyed the town.
There was a woman in the church who told me the story about how her husband was clinging to a branch, to a tree, through the entire night of the flood.
And I think every dam in Monson broke. And there were 4 people trapped that were going down to get their cars. And 3 of them got washed away. So my dad had a boat in the backyard. And he took the boat, tied a rope to it with the tractor, went up the street dragging the boat, lowered it out, and saved 3 people that were holding on to tree limbs.
Monson, to me, has that, I love that old town community feel.
The quintessential Norman Rockwell town, because everyone really knows your name, and with 8,500 people, even though that sounds like it might be a lot. And my son graduated, but there were only 60 members in the class. So I think that growing up as our youth in town, that they really get a feel for a sense of community.
Just living, in a smaller town, everybody seems to know each other.
You can go to the grocery store and just have to pick up a couple of things and you end up being there an hour because you run into this person and then you run into that person and you're chatting and catching up.
A lot of the population in Monson has been here since they were born.
I think Monson was just a nice, pleasant little town that was, doing its thing. That's what, for a lot of folks, I think that's kind of what life was like. It was just kind of, things were just sort of going along and things were okay.
You felt safe. You didn't have a reason to feel unsafe.
June 1st, 2011, I actually was at a training program in the eastern Mass part of the state and came home and was cooking supper and had the TV on, and they announced that there was a tornado watch and a tornado warning, and I noticed the clouds getting really dark and green.
It was a beautiful day. It was blue skies, sunny, warm, but it had like this weird atmosphere. There was no wind.
But there were 3 supercell thunderstorms that were on the New York border. And I'm a weather geek. I love weather, and I watch weather all over the world and all over the country. I watch tornado chasers and all sorts of stuff all over the country on my computer. And that day I took a look at those supercells and I called my brother up in Maine and I said, we're going to have a tornado.
So I stopped at the Big Y in Wilbraham, it wasn't raining, the radio was on, there was nothing on the radio, no warnings. I went in like everybody else and I bought what I wanted, and as I got to the cash register and I'm cashing out, the skies turned literally a blue-black.
I walked around my house and took my 35mm camera and I took pictures of everything. I opened drawers, I opened cabinets, I just took pictures of everything I owned. And then I got an emergency kit together down in my cellar. I took a bin, I put the camera in there, a change of clothes, water, gloves, a flashlight, got stuff together. I had 2 cats at the time, so I got that stuff together.
We were in a faculty meeting, and the fire chief came in and told us about the tornado warning and that it was coming. And I was told, well, the whole staff was told we could either stay at school because it is the Monson shelter or go home. And I thought, well, I'm a mile from home, so I'm going home. So I came home and, I just did my normal thing, and, I went on the computer, and then the computer went out, and I'm like, okay, what's going on? I just thought it was something electrical. And then a hailstorm started. So I went out and I'm videotaping the hailstorm, and I'm like, Michael's never gonna believe this. And then I went out and grabbed some hailstones and put them in the freezer. And I think that was the last time I came in the house, because I went out a couple times. And then it just started. It was just, I didn't know what it was at the time. It was just the loudest noise you could ever imagine. And I walked from the living room to the kitchen and back to the living room, screaming the whole time, of course, and it was over. And in between there was, you could hear breaking glass and just everything crashing and not knowing where it was going. And then as soon as it was over, we have a half circle window on our front door, and I, went on my tiptoes and looked out, and just across the street, just everything was all flattened.
I drove school bus for quite a while, so I went up to the school, and as we were bringing the kids home, it was getting very dark, and some of the kids on the bus were getting a bit scared, and they said, gee, Mr. B, it's awfully dark out here. I ended up dropping all the kids off. I went back, I put the school bus away, we clocked out. I came into the house, and it started to rain. I ran into the bathroom, shut the window, and it was pouring rain, hailing, and I thought an airplane was going to hit my house. So I ran to the cellar.
I'm going down Glendale Road in Wilbraham, and there's a big farm area towards the end of Glendale. And I look over, and all of a sudden, I see the tornado, and it was huge. I turned into my driveway. I come up the driveway. This whole side of the driveway had trees, and they were falling like dominoes. I just drove in alongside it and put the front end of my car and jumped out. I didn't even take anything. Ran in the house, and I'm yelling for my husband, and he said, help me. I've got to get these dogs in the cellar. And we got the dogs down the cellar in like less than 2 minutes. The tornado hit. And
then my ears popped, and I thought, oh crap. Because, then it dawned on me that this tornado was still really happening and had reached us. I really had not, I was not taking it seriously enough, clearly. And I think as with a lot of other people, expected that it was not going to deal with the hills well and wasn't really going to be anything. We were in our dining room and a window broke. And with that, we ran to the basement and sat on the basement floor holding each other as things banged and crashed for what seemed like forever.
And as I shut the door to go down cellar, I stopped for 1 minute, and across from our door, I had a picture window. The picture window shattered, and I could hear the glass hitting the door. And I froze for a second, trying to figure out what that was. And then within an instant, it seemed like the house just went right up into the air, and I got thrown in the basement because the stairs are attached to the house, and the house just flew away. And as I was thrown down into the basement, I'm looking around, and you have the metal pipes that are holding the center of the house up. So I grabbed onto one of the center pipes. I took off my glasses because I said, I don't want my eye to get cut. And the very next thing I knew, I was floating. I came up about 4 feet off the ground. I thought I was going with the house.
I got the cats and I went down to my cellar, and I had found a designated spot in the cellar that I thought was going to be a safe spot. It was by a lolly column, and then there was a set of stairs that went up over it. My cellar only had one window, and it faced north. So I had everything ready to go in the safe spot. I had a pillow and a blanket to put over me, and I was standing near the north window watching it. And I know as a weather person that when a tornado forms in the supercell thunderstorm, there's the hail core, then there's this space that's kind of silent called the bear's cage, and then the tornado. So I knew that was the sequence of things as it was going to come through. So I was watching it through the north window. It was coming from the west, and I could see the hail, and the hail was like the size of golf balls, and it was just bouncing on the ground. Then the hail stopped, and the sky turned yellow, like a amber yellow. And I knew we were in the bear's cage, so I got in my safe spot, and I could hear it, and I'm like, oh, this is what it's like being in a tornado? Ah, this is nothing. This is a piece of cake, you know? Well, then that was it coming, and then it hit.
I remember driving, but then I remember that we were like at not like a stop, we were still moving, but we were higher off the ground. So I don't know how high we were lifted. I don't know if it was just the front of the car or even if it was the back of the car. I don't know. But I do remember being airborne at some point when that funnel crossed the street behind us. And then it's weird. It's like somebody hit the pause button, and then it's like somebody hit play again.
All I heard was the air sucking out of the basement windows. Sort of like just this sucking sound in the house, and I could hear the sound of the air sucking out of the house. And still to this day, whenever I hear wind and whistling wind and things in windows and stuff, it's still, I get pretty creeped out.
It had to have been over like in 5-10 minutes. It didn't last long. You couldn't, when you're in the cellar, you really couldn't hear anything. You couldn't hear the trees falling, nothing. When we came out of the cellar, the freaky thing was right over in the corner here, I had this huge oak, and it had literally fallen down on the driveway where I just come up, right at the top of the hill here. Checked on our neighbor that the trees fell on. Fortunately, there was nobody home, and then he checked on a house right down the road here, and she was so grateful that somebody checked to see if she was okay.
And then it seemed like forever. And then all of a sudden, like somebody shut it off, and bang, I went down to the ground, and I'm looking up, there's no house, it's gone. And all the debris started falling into the basement. I got hit in the head with a piece of wood, but nothing serious. So I had my telephone with me. I called my son. I said, Andrew, there's a tornado here, it just took our house away.
Then it disappeared. It was a few minutes. You could hear the winds. It ended up being about a half mile from me, thankfully, not right here. So when we came out, we went out on the front. I actually have a video of it showing out on the front lawn of my house with my neighbor. We all kind of came out and said, whoa, that was a bad storm. And we made it through, not even realizing that behind me.
The street here was just tree lined across, and people would be going up and down. Of course, I think, well, one of these has to be Mike, and I was right near the window by the, to call out, and every time I called Mike, they're like, nope, not Mike, and so.
The street was unrecognizable because I went by my own house and by the neighbor's house, and luckily she called out. That was my first indicator that I was at least close, because you couldn't see the Keep Homestead. All my landmarks were gone. I used to go by this big tree, or that tree was a landmark, and everything changed, that day.
Couldn't even get up our driveway, so he ended up just parking on our neighbor's lawn just to, park the car, and yeah.
I texted my cousin Melissa, and she said their roof came off. The second floor is gone. Russ Brissett's home behind them was gone. The North's house across was upside down. We're able to climb over trees, get on the back of someone's truck. We still don't know whose truck it was. A volunteer offered to bring them here to my home, and they showed up, and we just gave each other big hugs because they had to get out. There were wires everywhere. It wasn't safe to be on those streets.
We're parallel to the tornado at this point, and I'm staring at the tornado through the passenger side window. My ex is driving the car. So what I'm seeing is, I'm still in shock at this point. I remember seeing the tornado, the funnel, on the ground parallel to us as we're driving up the mountain. And I'm seeing like big, like 200, 300-year-old trees being just like ripped out of the ground. And to me, I'm seeing it in like slow motion. I'm watching these trees just being ripped out of the ground, and the only way I can describe it is like pulling weeds out of a garden, where you can see the roots snapping. The trees just being tangled with other trees and just being thrown. We get to my dad's house, and as soon as I see my dad's house is like fully intact, I wanted to cry. And his garage door was open. So we drive right into his garage, and only half the car fits because my dad has like all his tools and stuff in the garage because he doesn't use it to, park his car, but we're like, we need to get into the basement. After that, we felt like it was safe again. The sky was blue. We didn't think to go down Dean Pond Road. I wonder if anyone's hurt. How is our family, our friends, everyone downtown? A tornado just came through. Are there people dead?
I have a walkout basement. So when I finally took all the rubble off myself and I was moving everything, and I finally went out the door and I came around, and the police officer was just coming up to my front yard. But I couldn't hardly see him because there was so much trash in the front yard. Everything was everywhere. And I said, whoa. He said, are you all right? I said, yeah. So I'm the guy that called. I just got out of the basement. And he said, wow, I'm glad you're okay. He said, you sure you're all right? And he came up. I was hit on the head with a piece of wood, and it left an impression mark, but wasn't bleeding, so I was fine. And he said, okay, he's going back to the station. And I looked around. The garage was in my yard. The house was a 3-story house. It was tipped over, it was upside down. This house was sheared like it was cut in half with a saw. I'm looking up the hill. Everything was a bit of a blur, but I'm realizing now that it was a tornado. When I was closing the window in the bathroom, the tornado went across into the backyard. It took out, there's a spot back there with about 4 acres. It took that out and then came this way, and that's when it took my house. The yard was a mess. Trees were everywhere. I was growing pine trees in my backyard. I had about 100 Christmas trees. All gone but 3. That was it. The yard was flattened. I had 2 huge maple trees out here, gone. No one could get up and down the street. The trees were all in the road. Everything was a mess here. You couldn't do anything. All the trees on the street were in the street. You couldn't come up the street. You couldn't go up here. All the trees in the streets were blocked. Everything was really closed. So I saw a couple of people. I'm yelling, "Hello, you all right?" "Yes." The town was a mess, and I'm just looking. Finally, they let my daughters come up. My daughters live in Palmer. They finally let her come up to help me, and there was just nothing left. Everything was gone. And it's kind of like, that's when I realized that, everything that my wife and I collected for 40-something years was gone. But things are things. He must still had a purpose for me because I'm still here, and I could have been gone easily. So I'm amazed that I'm still here.
All I can attribute it to was when you're in a plane and you're taking off and they gun the engines, and that's what it sounded to me. It was just deafening. It lasted maybe 30, 40 seconds, and it was just chaos. I remember thinking, one of the things I wasn't prepared for that they don't tell you about in any of the chaser videos or any of the experiences was it was pouring dirt. It was just pouring down dirt, and it was hard to breathe, and it was just swirling around, and that surprised me. I remember feeling so scared that I thought I was going to die, and yet I knew I wasn't. I knew I was protected. I remember looking at a bucket that was on the floor across from me and thinking, should I put it on my head for protection? It was just deafening. And like I said, it lasted 30, 40 seconds, and then it was done. And afterwards, it was dead silent. There wasn't a sound happening. And I stood up and I could see outside, and I thought, that can't be good, because I'm in the cellar. And I came to find out my neighbor's house got pushed into mine, and it took about a 3,000 pound piece of granite and pushed it in. So there was a hole in the foundation. One of the things that kept going through my mind is, will it come back? Is it coming back? Like, am I safe to go upstairs? So I stood at the bottom of my stairs for maybe a minute, and then I walked to the top of the stairs and I grabbed the door handle, and I just stood there for a second because I didn't know, kind of like where it was. And then I opened the door, and my apartment was a mess. It was still standing, and I found out later that the top half of it was gone, but my apartment was still standing, but there was just trees and junk everywhere. There were things that were on surfaces that were on the ground now. One of the weirdest things is the insulation from the house was like the walls were fuzzy. Like they were just fuzzy from insulation and stuff. All my windows were broken. I kind of went from my living room into my bedroom and bathroom off of that, and that was really wrecked because that's where Michael's house hit my house. Then I went into the kitchen, and there were trees and leaves and all sorts of stuff in my kitchen. And then I looked at my door, which was blown open. It was a metal heavy door that was blown open. The storm door was gone. and there was a hole. I had 4 windows in the top of my door, and there was a hole like this in one of the windows. And I kept thinking, like, what made that hole? And I looked down on the ground, and there was a shard of wood like this that was like a point that had come off of something and made the hole in the window. I still have that piece of wood. But then I stepped outside on my porch, and everything was gone. This is my backyard, what used to be trees and stuff. And the entire upstairs of my house is gone. Let me walk back here a bit. Wow. And you could see a path where it went. You could see, I don't know if you could see way out in the distance there, but there's definitely a path. Wow. Actually, it doesn't look like Rebecca got too much damage. Maybe. I don't know. Well, yeah, actually, there's a big hole. My whole backyard was gone. My brand new 2-month-old car was wrecked. I love that car. There were pieces of wood in the car. It looked like the dumpster had come down on the top of the car and then rolled to the side of it. And it wasn't anywhere near my car before the tornado. And when I looked across the driveway, Michael's house next door, he was nowhere to be seen, but his stepdaughter was standing looking at me. She was barefoot, she was covered with soot, and she just started saying, "I have no shoes, I have no shoes." And that's like the first thing I saw. So I ran back in the house and got her a pair of sneakers, gave her those, and then I just kind of started walking out into the yard, and it was just, everything was destroyed around me. It was unreal. And it smelled like pine. I still remember that smell, and it's still, if I smell pine, it brings me back to that day. Sirens, people coming out of the houses, just, it was crazy. It was eerily controlled. No one was panicking. People were thankful to be alive, and that's one of the things I still remember, is hugging people that I'm running into and just saying, we can replace the stuff. The stuff doesn't matter. We're alive, you know? And then as I came around my house, I couldn't come down the driveway where I normally was because Michael's house was there, so I kind of had to crawl around the other side. I remember them telling me, the firemen were there, and I remember them telling me there was a gas leak, so we needed to vacate the street and go to the police station, which was like 2 blocks from me. And I remember them carrying a young boy out on a gurney that had been injured down the street. The main path of the tornado went through their house and destroyed it. And I remember the 2 firemen carrying him on a board, and they were asking us to follow them, and the wires were live. So they taught us how to shuffle, step over the wire, and shuffle away from them. And we all had to cross these live wires. And then we went to the police station, and it was just crazy. I still remember my former neighbor on a big, huge bulldozer coming down the street, pushing the debris out of the street so the ambulances could get by, and him waving to me. His in-laws came up to me and gave me a hug. Their house was destroyed up on Stewart Ave. It was just nuts.
So we came out of the basement after everything stopped banging. The house was a mess. We had leaves and branches and things all over the house, and broken glass and things. And I walked out the door, and the line of oak trees going up the hill alongside the Ely Road, all along the edge of the parsonage, were trees that I believe were planted in the 1920s. Giant oak trees, park-like oaks that all were either laying down or were kind of hanging by a thread, a dozen of them. And no trees up on the hill above the houses on Ely. All of those trees were just shredded. I couldn't see the house across the street. The first little one on the bend on Ely, that little white one, was buried in trees, literally buried in trees. The trees were just from all over the place. Now, what was crazy was the house wasn't really damaged. They fell all around it, and the trees were like piled almost over it, and the house was still there. I came around the corner of the house and saw that the steeple was lying on the front lawn. Started walking around, and people were coming out into the street, looking around, just shock. I mean, just utter shock at what there was. When I came out, 360 degrees around me was devastated.
I believe there were 75, this is including homes and buildings, that were just gone, obliterated, no more. And total of 300 that were damaged, most of them severe. I mean, we're talking the First Church, we're talking Town Hall, and many homes down in that area behind Town Hall. So MEMA and FEMA there the next day. The state had all the resources, and again, volunteers from all over the country, tree companies coming in. And they really started, they started doing the assessment. They got their emergency management team. And from day one, you know, I was talking to the police chief and the fire chief. They went around and assessed, all right, here's what we need to do. I gotta tell you, for as chaotic and as crazy as it was to look at it, it was probably the most organized chaos I've ever seen.
So when the tornado came through town and it went through the center of town, it blew off the town offices. The whole second floor was destroyed, and the police station was in the town offices. So they were in the back part of the police station in the lower level, thankfully. But it was unsafe for them to even be in the building. So they were really operating out of their cruisers those first couple of days before they could get a FEMA trailer in there to operate out of that. Their communication was totally cut down, and they were right in the center of the town where the houses were upside down, directly across the street from where the police station was. It's unbelievable. Everything was gone. So then they had to really do a lot of their operations out of cruisers. They were over to the fire station, but they couldn't even get over to the fire station that day because every single telephone pole, electric pole in the downtown area was upside down, was strewn all over.
Just seeing used to be a huge pine tree just twisted up like a Twizzler, just round and round, and you know, big oak trees, ones that were leaning towards the house. I don't know how it happened, but they went the opposite way of the house instead of falling on the house. They just landed on the ground in most cases. And just watching the downtown, I think like the last lights to go off were like around 1:30. I don't know if it's the senior center or the town hall, but they had a generator going. I think they finally shut it off. And even like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, you could hear chainsaws going. But that first night, we just got in the house, made sure it was kind of secure, and made sure that we had all our pets were accounted for. And I started the next day just kind of wondering what to do until people started showing up, offering a hand.
It was very impressive how everybody in the community helped out. It was just unbelievable that, even the neighbors, everybody was helping neighbors, and it was really, really quite something to see.
Our main focus was, is everybody okay? Is everybody alive? Everybody's still in shock. It's one of those things where the shock doesn't just wear off when especially since, Matt, like I said before, Massachusetts doesn't get tornadoes. So the fact that a tornado came through is just still 10 years later, it's mind-boggling. There was so much destruction, it was like a war zone. Dunkin' Donuts, I remember thinking this. Dunkin' Donuts was the only building that was perfectly fine, and I was like, I have to go back to work. But then when we saw Dunkin' Donuts was intact, I was like, oh my God, my car was in the parking lot. So I go and see my car, and my car was the only car in the parking lot that didn't have any damage to it. There was trees on other people's cars. The only damage that my car got was hail damage, and it looked like cheese. My car looked like cheese. It was just like holes. I still drove it for like 4 years after that, with the damage on it. I stuck a sticker on the back of it that said "Survived the tornado."
The next morning, we got up and I brought my nieces up to their home, and that's when we realized the severity. As we drove downtown and went on the streets, it was one house after the other was gone, was devastated. People were standing in rubble.
You know, to have your whole life shredded like that is just, it's devastating. And there were many people who were never able to get back in their houses, never able to get many of their possessions because it was too dangerous.
This is where I realized that this isn't just our little hometown, Monson, or even Western Mass, because there was cameras from all over the country. There was news agencies from all over the country. And so they started this press conference, you know, with Senator Kerry speaking, then Congressman Neal, the governor. They gave peace of mind to people. They gave comfort in knowing that, hey, listen, Monson, this, you know, I know sometimes people think Western Mass is forgotten, or a town like Monson, who's ever heard of that? But we're here for you. We're not going to forget. And this is your local government. This is your state government. This is your federal government. So by the time I spoke, I had such a comfort level because I felt better as a resident, as a father, as a husband, and as a state rep, knowing that, you know what? I'm in a good state here. I mean, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and we're in a good position. Of course, you never want something so horrific to happen, but it is comforting to know that we are prepared for things like this.
The trees are not just laying one way, they're laying multiple ways. It was crisscrossed everywhere. You couldn't walk 3 feet down the road. That's how much of a mess it was. We let everybody in the neighborhood park in our yards because they couldn't get to their house, so they had to walk to their homes. And then we walked downtown, and there was the National Guard, other National Grid, everybody downtown.
Between the chainsaws were out almost immediately after the rains had stopped. People started kind of coming out. I was up trying to figure out what to do, and probably finally fell asleep around 2 that night, and was up at 4, 5. I got up and did a drive around, and I could not believe the destruction. By this time, they had taken a big bucket loader, the large size bucket loader, and they more or less plowed up Ely Road using the bucket loader to move the trees off to the side. They basically just shoved everything off to the side.
Here we go. Yes! Yes, 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 yes! Woohoo! And we got one window standing. Woo! The whole driveway was just lined with trees, and so it was really hard to even walk up between walking up the driveway and the path, and even into the porch itself. And so we just went in and looked over the damage and stuff, and I know the back windows were all broken. So we were like, well, we can't sleep in those bedrooms, so we just ended up hanging out in the living room all night and just getting up the first morning and just walking around and surveying. I know we went and helped our neighbor the first morning because they had a lot of devastation too, and because like I didn't really know what to do. You know, we didn't even have a chainsaw, so we couldn't do anything to even with any of the trees or anything. And the first people to stop by were some friends of ours and his son, and they're like, "Do you want us to clear your driveway?" And we're like, "Yes, please." So they were the first one. They cleared our driveway, cut everything up, stacked it all, and I think they moved on to their next person they were going to help. And then from then on, people just started showing up.
We're just looking at, you know, all the damage, and it was bizarre too. You'd see one house completely intact or maybe minor damage, and then across the street, the house just gone. And next to it was fine. And I saw this woman and her husband sitting, literally, it was the cement steps. And so I went up to talk to her to see how she was doing, and of course she was, you know, distraught. But just to show how powerful this was, she said she got a call that morning that somebody found her checkbook, and they were in Milton, Mass. which is, it's like 95 miles from Monson, which just insane that, you know, with everything, it picked it up and a checkbook flew all the way over there. And I think she didn't even know how to feel, because it's something, it wasn't like somebody broke in, kicked your door down or your garage. Her house was just gone. And you could see like their sheets and stuff they had like hanging in trees. It was really sad. But at the same time, you saw neighbors that maybe never would have spoken before, didn't have any connection, bring in, hey, do you want some water? Do you need this? What can I do for you? And again, it really brought out the best in humanity. But yeah, the path of destruction was just, if you looked at it, you think, how do you even start? Where do you begin?
The very next day, we all came back. I look in my front yard. There's 30 people cleaning up. What are you guys doing here? We're helping you. You did a lot for this town. We want to help you. Really. And everybody just started cleaning up a lot of the stuff, picking up some things.
What people would do is put things in carts, and people were walking all around town with shopping carts full of water, all kinds of things.
The upside down house was the one house that hit me hard. From what I had heard, the story to that was the woman was in her bathroom, I believe, at the time, and she was like thrown out her window when her house went up and like flipped over, and the peak of her house went right into the ground in the yard. So you just saw like the basement, and then you just saw this house that was perfectly upside down. It looked like a toy, like some little kid had like a doll house and just in the ground. That's when it really hit me and I really started to cry. I had a meltdown when I saw the upside down house. And that's when the lady came up to me and gave me a hug. And I'm thinking to myself, why are you hugging me? I should be hugging you. Like, your house is upside down. You could have been killed. You're blown out your window. But you're comforting me. And that was like my aha moment. There is so much more to this experience than like people losing their homes or their cars, their material items. Like, they were so happy to be alive that none of that mattered. So when she came and comforted me, she was relieved to be alive. She was like laughing, she was smiling, and she just, I don't know, she like lifted up the spirits of these people around her that were seeing her house.
When we were walking around the day after, there were different people doing things to support the people that had damage. For instance, on my street, at the other end of the street, there was a house that wasn't damaged. They were cooking hamburgers and hot dogs for like weeks on end, just handing them out to people, bringing them down the street to people who were cleaning up. If you walked by and you were hungry, you could eat there. Karen and her group had set up little tents around town. They kind of had created a hub at First Church up on High Street.
People from all over the country that had flooded in to help out, which that's always, I mean, the silver lining to these horrible tragedies. You see the best of humanity.
Within like a day, we had cases of water, bug spray, Gatorade, gloves, just incredible amounts of help that came from all over Massachusetts and even Connecticut and stuff. There were people driving around in pickup trucks, handing out water, handing out bologna sandwiches, just whatever they could do to help the people cleaning up.
It took probably like half hour just to get to the end of the street because it was just constant cars. You just kind of put in park, wait till someone goes, and a lot of people didn't know the area, so they're bringing vehicles which are kind of a little too big for Monson, so they have to kind of back down. And a lot of heavy equipment was coming up too. They had, the skidders, some of the feller bunches come to take care of the trees, or their flatbeds get the trees, so it's hard for them to get up. Then I get down to First Church. We heard that the church lost its steeple. It was, oh my God, the steeple's down there, the clock had stopped, and just driving past that, I was like, wow, this is really real. That's kind of when it hit me too.
But I couldn't believe, and it touched my heart to see so many people from other areas of the town and from other towns helping. I stopped this lady on the third day and I said, "Where are you from?" She said, "I'm from Rhode Island." I said, "What are you doing here?" She said, "You people need help. We're here to help."
We had a camp kitchen right outside the front door because we had no electricity. And so they were bringing us food. We had plenty of things to make sure we fed people too that were coming up. And people just started showing up by the carloads and the truckloads with chainsaws.
I had a beautiful white Lincoln that my wife never liked. She got even with me. She put a 2x4 right through the car and down through the engine so I couldn't drive it anymore. So she took it away from me. And I just laughed because she didn't like the car, so she ruined the car.
Russ had told me that there was an angel, a glass angel. I can't remember if it was like a Christmas angel, but he had it after his wife had passed away, and it was special. And I think he had one for every person in his family. I think his kids, he had one, but specifically when the tornado had hit, his cat went missing. I think the cat's name is Patches.
The cat was my daughter's favorite cat, and the cat had disappeared. We didn't know where the cat went.
So he went in there like one last time, and he saw that this angel was just sitting there, like someone had placed the angel on the couch. And he went and he picked it up, and he heard a meow. And that's when he found the cat, his wife's cat, was stuck in the couch.
On about the fourth day, I came in the yard and I saw my two grandchildren. They were picking through the rubble. And my granddaughter, Britannia, she picked up a doll and she said, "This was Meme's doll." So I couldn't take it anymore. So I called Connecticut. They came up with trailer trucks and I had everything taken care of. I didn't want to see my grandchildren like that. So I had everything taken out, everything scooped up and gone, and cleaned up my yard so that we could try to get over this.
I mean, you got used to the chainsaw sound for weeks afterwards. It wouldn't go away, and the smell of the pine in the air just kind of struck you.
That stayed with us for weeks. And I know we knew it was daybreak because the helicopter started. And it was like that for 4 straight days. Every morning, you knew when it was daybreak.
You could never, ever put enough on the generosity of the people in the town and their help. Wherever they came from, they just helped. It didn't matter. The town just bonded and helped everybody do everything.
We were without electricity or the ability to get down the road. The whole process was about 10 days because I remember it distinctly because we had to go out and get breakfast or go to lunch or supper at restaurants, and everything was affected. It was really kind of weird that, there was nothing really open. The tornado had caused so much damage. There were sections like Wood Hill Road and Zool that didn't open up right away.
I opened up the church building and kind of sat in there and didn't know what to do and thought, at the very least, we should have a prayer service. I decided that would probably be best to do later in the day, and I think it was like 4:30 we scheduled a prayer service. We wound up having folks from the Catholic Church, from the church in Brimfield. We had, I think, the Unitarian Universalist, and I think the Methodist Church all participated. About noontime, we were hanging around at the church, and somebody showed up and said, "Are you taking food? Are you taking donations of food?" And we said, Sure, what do you got? Well, we've got burgers and rolls, and the Red Cross won't take them. So we thought you'd like them. So we said, absolutely. So they brought in boxes of burgers, rolls, hot dogs, the whole works. Shortly after that, somebody comes up with, a bunch of cases of water. The Red Cross won't take them. So absolutely. So we started by later in the afternoon. We had to start figuring out where to put stuff, and we started moving things to the downstairs as donations were coming in. And while the prayer service was happening inside, we had people outside cooking and getting ready to serve meals. That just started us rolling. We served 3 meals a day at that point for the rest of the month.
Adams had truckloads of water and all sorts of stuff. Their store got damaged and had to be closed for, I think it was the summer. But they were still out there with stuff for people who needed it.
Some of the guys were living out of their trucks because they come from so far. As other volunteers get here first, they might grab up all the free hotel space, so they're literally sleeping in their trucks. And so we always try to help them out. You want to use the bathroom, you want a coffee, whatever we could do for you, just let us know. I mean, you're away from your family, you're helping us out.
I still remember when I finally got a chance to move my stuff into a new apartment. I had a bunch of people helping me, and then some people had to leave, and at the very end of the moving, I had a big, huge armoire that was really heavy that who was left could not move. And my friend went up to First Church, and 4 guys from Kentucky moved my armoire, and they were having supper at First Church.
Over that next day, as we were, kind of receiving things and trying to figure out what was going on, we started having clothes come in. So then clothes was going into the basement, and we still didn't have power, and we were working with flashlights and just dealing with whatever. By Saturday, I think we had generators show up on Saturday. We started getting in more and more donations.
You came down and you needed to have breakfast. It was there for you. It was free. That was just absolutely incredible, all the things they did. Because I remember when I went back to work, the first thing I did was I came down there because they were still helping people, and I wrote them a check and said, here, this is what you need, not a problem. Because they really went out of their way.
We're in the middle of breakfast. We don't have enough sausage. We need sausage. 20 minutes, and we put out, we need sausage. 20 minutes later, it said, no more sausage. Thank you, no more sausage. So we put out where we need a freezer, and by, within an hour, it's like, no more freezers, no more freezers. We're good. And this all just started rolling very organically.
The church, they didn't have enough money to be paying for 2,500 people, to have meals and things and all the supplies that we needed. So as I sat around a table with Joe Sorial and Laura Sorial, I said, I've been on a few different committees and we had some fundraising with t-shirts. So let's do a t-shirt, and that way people can know who the volunteers were, because we were all in street clothes and no one knew who to ask questions of and all of that. And we ended up selling them because people were asking. They said, oh, I'd love to get one of those t-shirts. So we sold them. I think it was $20 a piece. We raised $10,000 in a week. We gave away hundreds of thousands of dollars because people wanted to know what they could do to help. So Monson Savings Bank opened up a fund. And so anytime we had donations that we weren't using for whatever we needed at the church were given to this fund. And then people could apply from the town that were affected. And we had a committee that met, it was almost a year later, to be able to see what unmet needs were done. And we had a point system, and we would meet every week, a point system through the application to figure out how much in need people were, and we would give the money away. And we gave, I think it was over $300,000 in the end.
We estimated that we had served, by the time we were all done, when we shut down serving meals, 20,000 meals went out of our kitchen. in a period of less than a month. And we fed anybody that we could. We fed everybody that was anywhere. You know, if they needed food, we tried to get it to them. Over the course of 6 months, we had volunteers that we were working with for over a year.
That was the first time I've ever seen a community really come together. They had organized people with chainsaws to help clear other people's properties and stuff. They really organized and did a lot in town, and it was just amazing.
2 days later, after the tornado, we had a big town meeting because no one knew what was going on and where to go. So they had a town meeting that we had in the gymnasium at the school, and everyone, the officials got up and spoke, and they were speaking about recovery and rebuilding overall.
I can tell you from, like I said, the community standpoint, we are solid. We are progressing. We're going to get through this, and you just need to let us know what it is that you need so that we can address that. We feel confident, very confident, that everyone has been accounted for.
Monson 1 will recover, and that it'll be a stronger and better community to live in because of the coming together that has happened.
The concern we have at this point is the building is not safe. We had a structural engineer in there today from the insurance company, and we are in the process, as I left earlier today, of securing this site. It has been complicated because we have been continuing to power the building with a generator in order to allow the police department to continue to function on the modified basis that it has been able to.
This town has been around for 250 years, and I will tell you, your spirit may make this your finest hour. I am so proud of you.
What's most important to us at First Church is the community, is all of you, is the people who live here. This is a tight-knit community. This is a community that cares for each other and takes care of each other, because what we're living in the middle of right now is what we would call divine chaos. And so we appreciate your support. Any things that you would like to donate, come see us. If you would like to get anything, come see us. If you know somebody who needs something, please encourage them to come see us. And together, we can get the town back together.
The next day was the FEMA Center. Maybe I can just find some houses that I've had for sale that maybe, since they're gonna have to take it off the market, we can get them in. So they said, okay, you can be in charge of housing. Why don't you sit at that table? So they pointed to a table, they made a placard for me, and I was now the housing person, just like right then and there. I was invited to have a seat at the table for the emergency response team, which was down at the fire station, and they would have daily briefings with all of the emergency service personnel, including FEMA and the National Guard and everything, and I was the volunteer representative. I found out that they were having meetings in Springfield that none of the Monson people could go to because they were too busy doing what they needed to. So as a volunteer, I went to Springfield to the HAP building, and I had a seat at the table, and I was known as Monson. So they're like, okay, Monson, what's your report? So every week, I would go and give a report for how many people still needed housing, how many affected, 272 affected properties, I believe, at the time, and what we needed. But I also would find out resources that they had in the Springfield area and all those areas that we knew nothing about out here. So we were able to bring all of that out here, and I, along with Gina Lynch from Brimfield, who was my kind of counterpart there, I would bring information so that both of our towns, we really worked closely at that time with them, that we were able to bring them information. So when there was, the Catholic Charities, for instance, was paying everyone's deductibles, I was able to bring that. And we started putting these things on flyers. And that's how the Street Angels were started.
I think we were pretty close-knit town before the tornado, but I don't think there was anyone not affected by it. Even if you weren't in it, just driving through the center of town, it affected you, especially people that had grown up here and things weren't normal again. And so when stuff needed to be done, everyone was working to get it done. Neighbor helping neighbor, you know, that's one of the things that the Street Angels kind of stood for.
Karen King, who was a realtor, played a big part of cleaning up and helping the people in town.
They asked the town if they could use the gazebo in town to kind of be the hub. So I went down to volunteer the first weekend and met her then, and I met some other people, and they were running the volunteer stuff every day and then meeting every night for hours into the wee hours of the morning, coordinating everything and what they could do.
She had really lost everything during that time. And when I said that I wanted to help people, she was one of the first people on the Monson Tornado Watch page that said, I can help. So here she is without a home, and she decides to volunteer. So she said, you know, I know the people on my street, on Washington Street. So she says, I'll bring flyers for you. We first found the different areas in town. The National Guard, when they came in, we met with them at First Church, and they set up quadrants in town because that's how the emergency people do. So there was 4 areas of town that were affected, and at that point I hadn't even known. All I knew is my family's, but that's when we quickly found out the other areas of town that we needed to help out. So I said to the National Guard people, we're gonna put up posts at the beginning of each quadrant. So I put a post out on our Monson Tornado Watch 2011 Facebook. We put a post out that we needed tents, pop-up tents. Immediately there were pop-up tents. Then once we could get into the streets, walking on the streets with the flyers.
I became part of all the groups, the groups that were coordinating all the work, and then the Street Angels was kind of like a separate group, and that was getting information to the people that needed it because they couldn't log on computers or get information because their houses were wrecked. So we would do flyers and go door to door, and I adopted my street, which was I think about 19 houses at the time. And then as things started progressing, I adopted another part of the neighborhood.
And the Street Angels function really was to get to know the people on the streets and to see what they needed. We were kind of the eyes and ears for those streets, and then we would come back and report whatever is needed, or we would say that they needed to get a FEMA number because everyone needed to be counted.
The duties were coming up with the newsletter, and I would help Karen a little bit on that. She would print everything out. And then we would meet at the gazebo, whatever Street Angels were available that day. And then we would go to our neighborhoods and we would walk door to door, giving the newsletter out to the people that lived there, and then asking them questions, writing down any needs that they had. Those needs would be brought back to the gazebo where we had a whiteboard, we had phones, we had a list.
They went out and helped everybody do everything. They are the ones that found an engineer, a structural engineer, so that I could get the foundation okayed, so that I could rebuild my house. I couldn't even begin to think how they helped everybody in town. They just went out, the Street Angels, and helped everybody. They had some fundraisers with cups, they had t-shirts, anything that you needed, you could ask the Street Angels, and they would do.
I spent so much time up here over the next days, weeks, months. I got to know so many people personally, people that I'm still friends with now, Karen being one of them. And I found out about the Street Angels, and I was like, oh, well, what is that? What are they doing? And it's just so typical of who we are as Americans when something bad happens. Certain people organize, get together, and Karen, and there was others as well that came together and said, what can we do to help people? Whether it's making care packages and dropping them off.
There were almost 50 families that we helped get into housing. There were, to my knowledge, 272 affected properties in town, but not all of them needed housing. And some were in housing for over a year. Then we realized after a year that people were going back home, so many of those same volunteers that were no longer needed to bring flyers, we made welcome home baskets. So one of the first people I found about that had an affected property was about Russ Brissett. After all of that, there were people that just kind of converged on his house, volunteers helping in any way they can to pick through the rubble and save whatever they could. And we were able to provide resources to give him on our flyers that we were bringing that the solar energy people were coming to town, that there were rebuilding efforts, that there were tree planting committee, so that Russ could reach out to those people in order to rebuild. When he moved into his home, we had a homecoming party for him where there was a picture that had been destroyed in the tornado, and through the generosity of a photography place, they were able to restore that photo, and we gave that to them as a gift. It wasn't just the people that were physically here, a lot of people that weren't. I still to this day have leftover cards that people were sending things from all over the country. Even some that were in different countries that used to live here were sending things. And it was just inspiring, and it just shows the heart of everyone, whether they lived here or not.
She and so many people came together and really showed what Monson's all about, and that's, you know, like you've heard in other communities, but they're Monson strong. They had their t-shirts, they had a run after it, raising money for it. Every year there's a heroine of the year. I nominated Karen, had her at the State House the following year to recognize her. And I even told her, I said, yeah, this is about you, but it's really about the entire community, because you represent what the people of Monson are all about.
You know, the word of mouth that was spreading after the tornado and stuff, you know, people coming up and stuff with stories, and, you know, so-and-so got their house fixed, or, you know, and it's amazing and stuff.
It was neat to see the progress throughout the weeks and months. And it was nice to see the blue tarps finally disappear.
Neighbor helping neighbor, you know, that's one of the things that the Street Angels kind of stood for, is neighbor helping neighbor. And it was true. Every church had stuff going on to help. Every organization, the town itself, the firefighters and the police and the town DPW, they worked tirelessly for months, cleaning stuff up and coordinating efforts and keeping people informed. It was just incredible. And that spirit still lives today, because there are, when Hurricane Sandy came through, we had a group from Monson volunteer to take a truck of stuff down to Long Island, because they knew people in Long Island that had nothing, and we gathered stuff for, I don't know, 2 weeks, and then this group from Monson drove down to Long Island and just out of the blue, you know, brought this stuff to people who were in need.
Monson definitely came together. I mean, if people didn't know each other before the tornado, which, you know, it's a small town, so everybody basically did know each other, they definitely knew each other after the tornado had hit. Everyone just came together. It was Monson strong.
Yeah, I have an angel tattoo that I got on my leg. I actually got it because I felt like I had an angel protecting me that day. Then I volunteered for 3 years with the Street Angels. It's on my right leg, and it says Monson strong. It kind of became our motto after the tornado, and yeah, it got put on t-shirts, and anything posted about the tornado online. It's just become our kind of our warrior voice, you know.
Little angels, they never asked other than, what do you need and how can I help?
And so that's how Street Angels came to be.
It's rather difficult when you watch your whole world turned upside down in a fraction of a second. It's a rather difficult thing to process. The ways that people reached out to help each other was extraordinary. And it wasn't just from here. We had crews come up from New York and from Connecticut.
On a block, when you lose all the trees, it's then just almost like an open field with houses. And that was something I never thought about. Even when the tornado hit with the recovery, I hadn't thought about, gosh, you gotta replant trees. We're thinking about, obviously, life, about, you know, livelihood, people getting back in their homes or getting new homes. And then it was after all that kind of stuff settled, I had some of the people approach me and say, you know, we need trees back. And then when I really started looking at it and get the visual, and you realize, wow, what a huge impact. And again, this isn't something that, oh, we plant the trees, it's over. this is 10, 20 years before it gets back to where it may have been before. So there were grants available, and I was happy to be able to come out here on a couple occasions when we got the first allotment of trees and help plant them, and just to start that process again. And I think it was helpful seeing the trees in the ground, but it was also kind of symbolic, like, hey, this is our rebirth right here. We're starting over, we're planting. I think it's going to be one of those things that 10, 20, 30 years from now, parents are going to say, you know, see that tree over there? Well, that was planted in the tornado back in 2011, and this is what happened. I think it's going to remind people of their growth and where they are now, but it's also going to remind them that, hey, that was all the stuff that was taken away, and we're so grateful that these trees are back, and our town is growing like these trees.
It took me about 6 to 8 months to decide exactly what I wanted, because I wanted to rebuild green, and I wanted to do it the right way. It was the following year that I rebuilt my house. And so a lot of funny things happened that year. As spring started, I had nothing here but an empty foundation, and I look out in my yard, there's corn stalks. Where the heck did those come from? There's sunflowers 5, 6 feet high. So when I mowed the yard, I mowed around those because somebody had a bag of seeds in somebody's house that dropped. It's like Johnny Appleseed, I guess. And I just thought it was odd that my front yard turned into somewhat of a garden. So I had a dozen corn stalks, I had a dozen peppers growing, I had a tomato plant growing, I had some sunflowers growing in my front yard.
I don't think it'll ever be the same as it was. A lot of those trees, even when the tornado hit, were probably 100 years old. I mean, the huge one they lost up at Keep Homestead was, you know, just so thick and stuff. You probably get like 4 or 5 guys that fit your arms all around it. And, you know, the view, and I mean, won't be back to the same in our lifetime. And some people, I think we were one of the luckier ones. Like I said, we won the lottery compared to some people. We had good insurance, had a great contractor. The help was incredible. All the people coming up, and yeah, we lost a few windows in a car, but the car can be replaced, and we're going to get new and better windows. We got all our pets. My wife's fine.
And we made it through. That was the thing we were always thankful for.
When I was with the Street Angels, I volunteered for a little over 3 years with them. And I believe at the time we kind of disbanded, there were still 2 or 3 houses that weren't fixed. But I think it took a good year and a half before most of the houses were restored. I know from my own experience, I didn't have to restore my house because I was a renter. It was my landlord's responsibility. But my own insurance claim for the contents took me 11 months to settle.
The shock of having a tornado go through your town and seeing it and experiencing it, it took a couple weeks before you started to really come down from feeling that way, from the shock. I don't really think it ever became normal again afterwards. 10 years later, I still don't think people are over what had happened. Every time there's a tornado warning on TV, you know, I hear people like freaking out about it, like, oh my God, are we gonna get hit by another tornado again? There's definitely PTSD.
The police station was really put in a tough situation working out of a trailer, and during a time like that, you really want your police, your police and fire to be able to respond, be able to get the information, be able to do the job they need to do as efficiently as possible. But this kind of forced the town's hand to say, all right, well, now our next plan is we need a new police station, town hall, and the plan went forward to put that all together and came out with this absolutely beautiful, perfect space right on Main Street with town hall / police station. And again, it reminds people that yes, this is brand new, it's perfect, it's nice, captured. What, you know, if you're coming in, you see it, say, oh, this is beautiful. It's new, it's revived, but you also look around, you see the churches down the street that have been there forever, and you realize that it's an old community, old New England community, still has its values, still has all those things that make Monson what it is, but it's also moving forward.
When I come in and I drive in my driveway, I always look up on the hill, where the tornado went up through, and I'm looking at all the trees that have no leaves, nothing on them. Sometimes I just say that I don't know how I'm still here. And some days I say, you know, whatever God wants, he takes. And it's time to behave because he can take anybody anytime he wants.
When it first happened and for the first few years afterwards, I couldn't drive through certain areas of town without feeling anxiety or all of that. I think we've all healed to the point where, or at least I have, you know, I can drive on Upper Hampton Road where I would have been if I were working. That's where I would have been when it came through, and I probably would have been in my car and hit by it. I can drive through there now and appreciate the green, and it doesn't look the same, but I can still appreciate it.
You know, and I think there's been a lot of trauma through all of the storms, and I think one of the great things with that Facebook page that is now known as Monson Speaks is been that we can come together to support each other in that way, because anytime a thunderstorm rolls through town and there's clouds, or, you know, the other day we had a tornado warning, and just really it brings people right back to that day and stuff. I don't think that'll ever go away.
I think that's the hardest part is, you know, it took down the trees and it made a path through different areas. And still to this day, like if you're up Westview Creamery and you look west, you can still see the path where the tornado came into town. Monson is a lot of forest land, and where the tornado wiped that out, it'll never grow back in my lifetime. It just won't ever be the same. Even 10 years later, I can still remember it like it happened yesterday. I can remember all the moments with it. I'm getting goosebumps again. I unfortunately have post-traumatic stress from it. I can pretty much get through a regular thunderstorm. Those kind of things don't bother me, although I do check radar a lot, you know, and do that kind of stuff. It's the minute they mention a possibility of a tornado that my anxiety goes up. I go into what they call hypervigilance, where I'm constantly checking radar, checking, you know, all that kind of stuff. And it's almost, for me, the buildup to the storm that bothers me the most. Once the storm gets here and I can tell it's just a regular thunderstorm, I'm fine with it, you know, and I'll sit on my porch and watch it. It's that buildup of maybe we'll have another tornado that just freaks me out.
It was just amazing how many people did come to our land, and even our neighbors, because they would shuffle from back and forth between the houses too. And again, I always say we can never repay them for what they did for us.
There were so many people. I mean, one story we heard from downtown, one person was smart enough to grab a journal. Hey, you're here to help me. You're here to help me. If you could just sign this book and stuff so I kind of remember you.
That's one thing I regret we didn't do. So now we just try to give back to the town as much as we can through all different organizations and activities. We're always there.
So I guess after we were things getting back together again in town, the committee decided that it was time for Summerfest, so that everybody needed to come back together again in a way that we, the Summerfest committee, wanted to show that we were grateful for everything everybody did for our town. And that year was a very successful Summerfest, and people just needed to get out, to come together, and it was our way of telling the town, thank you for all your help.
On the first year anniversary of the tornado, we had a big event in front of Memorial Hall.
As we look around us today and see how far we've progressed as a community, I think we can proudly say that today, this one-year anniversary, should also hold an important place in each one of our lives.
And 3 days after the power went out, 3 short days, National Grid, those workers with the flags and Marcy Reed seated in back of me, brought power back to this town in 72 hours. But no one worked harder than you. No one was a better repository of the human condition than your churches as well.
It was difficult to fathom just how powerful and devastating Mother Nature was. But what was more amazing was how human nature was even more powerful. Monson has come such a long way in the past year, and I am honored to play a small role in that recovery of the town that I have come to love.
Today, we gather together to recognize the work and significant recovery effort accomplished here in Monson over the past year. I've been asked to say a few words regarding the volunteers who have aided here in Monson after June 1st. Their work has been nothing short of miraculous.
We in the National Guard attend a lot of emergencies, a lot of disasters. But wherever I've been, I've never seen such tenacity, such courage, and such resilience. Within 24 hours, this town was back on its feet, neighbor helping neighbor, people talking about recovery, people making plans for the future, and most amazingly to all of our troops, our soldiers and airmen, is you were as equally concerned about us.
There's not a more beautiful community in America during the month of October. And I immediately remarked whether it was the Memorial Hall or how beautiful the architecture is of the public library, the commitment that preceding generations made to building and rebuilding in the face of great adversity. As we tend to easily use the word in America and our society today, hero. But there's another part of that heroism that is unsung and that is unheralded. It is frequently those moments of kindness and interaction that take place between people who find a common purpose at that very difficult time. What's striking about it is that as I visited with families that next day, people who were sitting on the decks of a former home or sitting on the foundation of a home, they were talking immediately about the problems that their neighbors had, that the great things we do every day in America don't happen necessarily in Washington or Boston. They happen right here in settings like this with people like you.
My last 5 words will be the same as my first 5 words at the info meeting at Quarry Hill. Thank God we're all safe.
Monson strong!
On our 5-year anniversary, we had a stroll downtown where I led the group talking about all of the areas of town and how we rebuilt and all the wonderful things that we had.
Because I think that it's one of those things that's now in the fabric of the community.
We actually had a hurricane a few months later after that in that same year. And I can remember being at the gazebo just saying, come to us if you need anything, because we were still volunteering obviously at that time. And I just think through this whole tornado, through the hurricane, that just people are just very aware of how much it meant to them in their hearts. They carry it with them in their hearts. Not only the people that really got help, but the people that volunteered. And I don't want to cry, but it just, it just really shows how we are here for each other, and that it's not necessarily the physical things, but it's the fact that someone put their arm around them in their time of need.
I just love this town so much, and they've helped me so much. I could never help back enough.
It was amazing how quick so many groups, so many organizations and individuals landed in Monson and knew where to go. I mean, again, it was the most organized chaos I've ever seen. You see all these people coming to a town most had never been to, coming to a community where they don't know where all the damage is, they don't know what's going on, but they set up, they got everybody in the right direction going, and I thought, as quickly and efficiently, it was pretty amazing to watch it unfold.
Recovery would not have been possible without the thousands of people that showed up to help us. I mean, we had people show up from Eastern Mass, we had Boy Scout troops, Girl Scout troops, churches, hundreds, if not thousands of volunteers that helped us put this town back together.
Somebody from outside of Boston sent me back some pictures that they found in their yard of people. And they said, these look like yours because it had your address on it. It was heartwarming to open up that envelope to see a picture that came back.
Angela, she came from Rockport, Mass, and she came to Monson and just delivered baskets full of supplies.
I remember personally driving into Palmer to get supplies. It was either the next day or the day after that, and feeling so odd that the rest of the world was still going on while our entire world had just been completely shredded.
And another woman, she set up an easel right at the bottom of our driveway area and just painted our house with the tarps and everything. And it was such a neat thing to watch her do that.
There were some ladies, we called them the plant ladies, that were coming from the eastern Mass part of the state bringing plants to people's houses because they love plants and they thought maybe that would just make someone smile. The generosity, people's heart is amazing. Just, I always tell people, like I think the Red Cross says, consider yourself asked. And I truly believe that if people are asked, they will help.
I think the town is different for different people today. For me, when I look at the town, I see a lot of the trees coming back. The town has rebounded. But to me, there's a peace in my heart that knows what I went through. And so when I still see a tree limb that's branchless, that's just there, it brings a lot of memories back to me. When all of a sudden a storm is getting ready to come and everything turns black, I think, is it my day?
This was like nothing I'd ever experienced. Yeah, I knew about weather and I knew what to do because of my knowledge of weather and stuff, but I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy because it was quite an experience.
Proud to be part of Monson. I mean, the support from our neighbors and the town people, and like I said, that first meal at First Church was just warm, and our neighbors who brought warm soup the next day, which is just the fact that it was warm was so wonderful.
We had crews come up from New York and from Connecticut, and the ways that people helped out were incredible.
It just, I don't know, it just, when I allow myself to think about it, it doesn't seem like it was that long ago, because it's still so real. It has been 10 years, and I think we've done a lot of growing in this town. I'd rather try to remember the good than the bad. Even though it's still present, I don't try to focus on the bad stuff. So I think remembering what a great town this is and the effort we all put in to recover from it.
If I had to go back and say, 10 years, look at the bond that the town did together. Look at the unity of the people. Unbelievable people that united. So if I could run it myself, I would like to pick every person that helped and line them up and shake their hand and give them a hug. If I could do that for the 10 years, I would, because I appreciate the people that came from Monson, from Parmer, from whatever town.
I think it's so important to preserve the history of any community, especially when something so impactful like this happens. You look back in history at other times, and there's certain things you just don't know what happened because there wasn't documentation or people didn't take the time to tell the story, so you have to come up with your own version. I think this is so important for not only the people that lived it and went through it, but the next generation, the generation after that, so they can look back and say, what's so great about Monson? Why is Monson so important? We'll say, this is just a little segment of one of the difficult times we went through and how we came back and preserved our life of who we are, adapted to it, grew from it, but stayed true to the values that we have as people living in Monson.
I hope they recognize and remember that it really takes all of us together. I think that the town of Monson physically has changed. We don't have the cute trees on Main Street, big old trees.
It took a tornado to really bring the town together and to really learn what matters in life. Your family, your loved ones, your friends, your neighbors. That tornado could have come in and killed everybody. We weren't expecting it. It just came over the mountain and it could have sucked us up in the funnel. We could have been gone in a second. One perfectly normal, happy day in the summer could have been the end of a lot of people's lives, but it didn't.
We did all come together for each other and how other people came back for the community. So I don't think that it will ever be forgotten.
Thank you. I mean, it's probably the best we could do. I mean, it just barely scratches the surface how much we appreciate all the help we got, and not just people in town. There's literally people from all over the world, our friends, family, and a lot of, mostly just strangers donating stuff.
The trees are growing back. You'll see trees coming up every once in a while. One will fall over, and I see that bare limb as a spot in my heart that knows what happened and knows the joy of the town coming together, the sadness of losing my house, but the joy of everybody helping me. That all comes together in my mind. And that's what makes me want to stay in this town forever. That's what makes me want to help people in this town. I am part of Summerfest. I'm part of the Arts Council. That's part of the town coming together, helping everybody else. And that's the part that I love the most. I would just say, after 10 years, thank you. I could never say that enough. I could never say thank you enough for the people that helped.